didn't really intend for this to turn into a series, but I guess it kind of is. I want to take another look at the early days of Moses, and we see if you read in Exodus chapter 2, Moses was now in the king's, raised as in the king's palace, in Pharaoh's palace, and he knew he was a Hebrew, but he was raised as an Egyptian, so he had a real mixed thing going on in his head. And there had to be some sense that God had placed him there to protect his people. So, again, you probably know the account. Read Exodus chapter 2. But one day he's out, and he sees an Egyptian being really tough on a Hebrew. And so he says, I got to stop this. Remember, he looks to the right, looks to the left, nobody around, boom. Kills the Egyptian. Next day he goes out, 2 Hebrews are fighting. He says, hey, don't fight. And they said, what, are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian? He's like, oh no, somebody saw that I killed an Egyptian. And so what did he do? He ran. Pharaoh was trying to kill him now. And boom, out he goes. He runs into the wilderness in Midian, and he comes to a well, and there's some shepherdesses, some young ladies with their shepherds, and he helped them. He actually protected them, and he helped water them. They go back and they say, wow, this guy from, this Egyptian helped us. Jethro, their father, said, hey, bring him here. He goes there. He ends up marrying Zipporah, Jethro's daughter, and watch this, Moses lives there, raises family there, tends Jethro's flocks. He now had a new life, and he just lived his life, and it was probably a good life, and I suppose he did well. He was probably a good shepherd, and he had a good wife, and he had good kids, and he had a good father-in-law, and he was doing fine. Now, when it came to thinking about helping or saving the Hebrews in slavery, it's gone. He's like, I'm done with that. I tried it. It didn't work. I'm disqualified. Gone. Any call that was on my life, I forfeited. He's done with the call of God. He's done with the passion to help his people. He's just living his life, and someday he'll die. That's probably what he was doing, living a very ordinary life. Now, I want to talk to especially those of you today who at one point in your life felt a sense of call, or you were passionate about something, or you thought you could make a difference, or you knew you could do this, or I could impact those young people, or I could go after that, or I could be involved with that. Well, then life kind of just took you in a road where, well, it's life. I'm living life. Yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm involved a little bit here, a little bit there. And if somebody were to say to you, what about that call when you were 20 years old, when you felt that sense of purpose? And maybe you're in your 40s now and you say, hey, that's long gone. I'm just raising my family, doing my job, being involved with the church, but I'm not interested in that big call. Well, I really do believe that's where Moses was. And that's where we pick up chapter 3. And we can get into this more maybe in the weeks to follow. But I want us to see in chapter 3, Moses is living his life, and the call of God is not right in forefront of his mind. And in chapter 3, it starts off, Moses tending his flock. He's out there tending Jethro's flock, not even his flock. He didn't have a flock. It's still his father-in-law's. Out there tending Jethro's flock, he looks up and there's a bush burning. Now watch this. That's not what surprised him. Evidently, there are times when a bush just burns and you see, oh, another burning bush, and walk on. The difference with this one was the bush was burning and it wasn't consumed. That's what troubled him. The bush is not being consumed. There's a fire, but nothing's being burnt. So watch this. His ordinary life was here. Something was happening over here. He could have ignored it, but you know what he did? He was interrupted enough that he looked and he stared a little bit, and he looked and he looked. And he says, something's going on here. So here's where we are. Maybe you are in your life. You're living your ordinary life. And and there's an interruption. An interruption. Something interrupted your normal life. I want to encourage you, don't think every interruption is bad. In fact, a lot of times the interruption will be from God. So take the time to at least look at the interruption and see if it's from God. Moses had to stop his normal life. The interruption happened. He stared at the interruption. Basically could have been thinking, is this from God? And he saw there was something different about it. And he thought, this might be from God. And obviously it was, right? This was the burning bush. And this was when the angel spoke to him. And this is when everything changed and the Hebrews were going to get freed and all of these things happened. But it only happened because he stopped. He was ordinary life, interruption, paid attention to the interruption long enough. It's not a distraction. Distractions get you off course. And interruption, at least look at it, see if it might be from God, and take at least a double look at it, maybe a triple look, and say, is this of you, God? Because it might be just the thing that's going to take you back to your original call. So here's my challenge for us today. Don't forget your call, because watch this. God doesn't forget his people. We're going to pick that up in chapter 3. He hears their cry. He'll never forget his people. Why? Because they're tied up in his promise, and he can't forget his promise. So he'll never forget his people, and he'll never forget his promise. They're tied together. So what will he do? He'll find somebody that he's called, and he doesn't forget the call. Even if it seems like I blew the call, God is saying, yeah, you're not done yet. Oh, but it's been 40 years. I killed a person. God says, let me tell you about forgiveness. Let me tell you about redemption. Let me tell you about a new start. And so he doesn't forget the call. So for you today, trust that God's not done using you. And then look for the interruption, because it might be in the interruption that God's ready to speak, change your life, and impact even thousands.